Well, we are going to get started. Thank you to everyone who has joined. And if you joined a little early, you got to hear our discussion about vintage goods. My name is Christina Helmick and I work at Extraco Banks, and we are about to get started with our part 1 series of the life cycle of human resources. And you will notice that you are logged on and you do not have video or sound capabilities. So if you have a question or want to share something, please use the chat feature. I will be monitoring that throughout today's workshop. And we'll interrupt the panelists and ask your question and chat you back. So please use that feature. This is a very conversational, a virtually conversational workshop. And so with that, I will hand it over to Sam Brown.
Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing out in TV land today? This doesn't feel as weird as it used to. I've acclimated to this virtual Bank and Brews. I'm really looking forward to reacclimating to the in-person, but I am so thankful we have this venue to get together. There are so many things that we can share with each other, and I'm just thankful that Extraco goes to the trouble of bringing experts and professionals together to share their knowledge and experience with all of you, because no point in all of us learning by making our own mistakes when we can learn from others' mistakes and learn from others' accomplishments. And that's really what Bank and Brews is about, is to where we kind of, the old rising tide raises all ships mentality. Let's learn from each other. And at the same time, let's have a little camaraderie and break up the routine of our day. So thank you all for joining us. Today is a very unique one in the sense that we're dealing with human resource departments, and we've brought 2 of our top folks in Extraco's HR department. I love these people. I have worked with both of them for almost 20 years. Well, one for 15 years, one for almost 20. And I jokingly say, but I'm 100% serious, if I applied at Extraco today, I would not get hired, because these people are so thorough and they do such a great job of screening folks. I don't think I would get past them. But they surround me every day with some of the highest quality people that I've ever worked with in my entire life. And that's from our tellers all the way up to our full-fledged officers in the bank and in our investments and insurance, in our mortgage department. I am surrounded by the top people in our industry. And there's a lot of things that can go right with your business if you understand HR. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong with your business if you don't. And this is not one of those areas where I think any of us want to learn by making a mistake, because when you make an HR mistake, at the very least, you waste time and money. But in a worst case scenario, you create bad customer experience, and or you may create a litigious liability situation that can cost your business dearly. Today is part 1 of the life cycle of human resources, and we've got the head of our HR department, and then one of our top people who deal with the majority of our applicants. Our second speaker today is going to be Liz Barton. Liz is a vice president of human resources. She's a generalist in HR with Extraco. She is SHRM Senior Certified. That's a big deal whenever you go to the trouble of joining that group and going through all their certification. During her 15 years tenure at Extraco, she served most recently not in our HR department as a recruiter and as a facilitator of employee onboarding and new hire orientation. Over the years, she served in multiple roles in our retail banking. Retail is what we call people banking. We have commercial banking and we have retail. And Liz was one of our go-to specialists in retail banking, including being a senior retail sales coach. She feels very passionately about the employee and customer experience. She's currently, outside of Extraco, she's the Public Relations and Information Services Chair for the Heart of Texas Fair and Rodeo, as well as serving on their board of director. Liz, when she's not serving the community and she's not working at Extraco, she enjoys running, exercising, and basically watching any sports. Liz, for years, was my go-to person. If I had a customer who was in a jam, Liz was the person I knew who could resolve it if there was any way to resolve it. And that's why now she's so high up in our HR department, helping us pick the people who serve in those roles. Speaking first, though, is Alex Eichenberg. Alex is the director of HR with Extraco, and he has been with Extraco since 1999. Alex has his BA in English Literature from the University of Missouri at Columbia. He went on to get his MBA at Baylor University. And outside of Extraco, he serves our community. He's works with the Chamber Lead. He's a mentor in the Lead program for Waco High students, as well as he's on the board of directors for Meals on Wheels. Prior to that, Alex has a very strong background in the theater, and he has volunteered with the Waco Civic Theater, the Lake Air Little League, and Compassion Ministries. And I don't know if there's a more interesting department at Extraco to work in because of all the things they get to do as far as finding good people, as well as resolving issues that come up. When you've got almost 400 employees like Extraco does, there's constantly things happening. And these people know what they're doing. We have actually let them talk to our individual customers before because it is important to us that people avoid HR problems. And that's why we're doing this today. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Alex Eichenberg, and we're going to kick off today's Bank and Brew. Alex?
Awesome. Thank you, Sam, for that flattering introduction, and I hope to live up to all those nice things that you said about us. But it is a pleasure to be here. I have been with Extraco for over 20 years. In my current role, human resources, for 5 years. In prior 15 years with Extraco, I've had opportunities to work in various departments. I've been a loan officer. I've been in retail. Spent time in marketing. So I've been blessed to try many different lines of business here at Extraco. So I know that most of our audience today is, small business, maybe sole proprietors, or certainly very small staffs. So I want you, if you're out there listening today and you're wondering, gosh, we're just not big enough to have an HR, full-time HR person, let me assure you, you are more qualified than you give yourself credit for. And our HR department, we do have some people who were formerly educated in human resources, but a vast majority of our staff comes from customer-facing, positions, operations leaders, and we've just learned that that business experience qualifies you more for HR than you give yourself credit for. So I want to tell you all, you've got honorary, associate degrees just by the fact that you're leading a small business. So have confidence and trust in your instincts. Our first topic that we wanted to discuss today, you'll see on the agenda, it's called, onboarding and new hire orientation. And basically, before I hand it over to Liz to talk about onboarding, I wanted to share an experience that we had here at Extraco. And, we're always evolving our thinking about how to improve the employee experience. And we just want to share some ideas with you, and hopefully they'll work for the organization. Maybe you just borrow one small idea to help improve the relationship that you have with your employees. But a couple of years ago, we made a clear distinction between the onboarding process versus new hire orientation. And 5 or 6 years ago, we were doing it all at the same time, all on the same day. And we realized from getting feedback from our new hires, as well as just realizing how much they forgot on that first day, that we were trying to do too much on day one. And we just want to give you that grace to say, you know what, you're excited because you brought someone into your organization, and there's so much you want them to know about who you are and what it means to work for your company. Be patient with yourself and maybe stretch that out over a longer period of time. And so what we've done is we make a very distinct break in our minds between onboarding. So we will go onboard, and it's technical in nature. And we'll share with you some handouts about that maybe you could use as a checklist. We'd recommend that you have a checklist, but just let onboarding be about the nuts and bolts, the administrative things, where to park. And you're just overwhelming your employees with so much on that first day about just how to operate, what to do tomorrow, that we recommend that you let orientation be a cultural experience. And I'll talk more about that after Liz goes through some of the best practices for onboarding. But we feel like we made a good move when we separated those two processes. So just let onboarding, be about day one and getting your feet wet and figuring things out, and then let your new hire orientation really be a cultural focus. And it doesn't have to happen in that first week or that first month. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So there's a difference between administrative orientation, and cultural orientation. And our recommendation at Extraco is that you allow them to be two separate processes. So with that, I'll hand it over to Liz to talk about onboarding.
Thank you, Alex. And Sam, want to tell you how much I appreciate the warm introduction. Again, we're really excited to be visiting with you this morning. We realize, want to repeat again, that we realize you are small business, sole proprietorships, and we hope that we can kind of take some of the pain out of onboarding a new employee by just giving you some reminders and hopefully helping you see things from their perspective and give you some tricks that will help you make it a smooth process. So first thing you want to do is make yourself a list so that everyone has a consistent experience. If you don't onboard employees very often, that's especially important because, again, you want to make sure that you don't miss anything. And there are a lot of little things. Employees want to do the right thing, so they want to know, where do I park? What door do I come in? Do I need to check in with you before I leave for lunch? Or, what is my schedule? So make a list of those important things that you need to communicate, because they, again, have those questions and they need to be answered. And if you answer them, on the front end, it will hopefully save some time and some confusion. Another thing, do you have a dress code? Is there an expectation for your customer-facing employees that their appearance matches, your culture? And so really be thinking about that. Do you allow, tattoos, for example? Are there specific uniforms that they need to wear? Go ahead and talk about that with them. And I would even, suggest that you do that prior to the first day. And then back to work schedules. How are you going to communicate this to them? Are you going to post it somewhere? Is there an app that you're going to use? Are you going to email them a schedule? And then how are they going to communicate with you if they need a day off, have an appointment? Are you going to be comfortable with them sending text messages to you, or would you prefer a phone call? If you have a frontline manager, do you expect the employees to check in with that person? Just ensure that you communicate well and early in the process what that communication looks like. And then introduce them to the team. And Alex, I want you to kind of talk about how important this is and how we kind of do that as we have folks coming through the HR offices. Right.
No matter what size company you have, when somebody joins, we'll walk someone through our department. So it's totally scalable to you. So they're going to be working primarily directly with you or with a very small team. But day one, even if they don't understand all the various things that or the roles that you're introducing them to, it's pretty important to make that connection of the name and the face and a general idea of what that person does. You don't expect the new employee, if you're in a large organization, maybe if you only have 10 people or less, don't expect them to remember everybody's name, but on day one to at least have that name and face recognition and a general idea of what that person does on their team. And, you know, I'll share something with you. I think it was an idea we got from one of our earlier Bank and Brews that's really relevant to small businesses, that, you know, thinking of, you know, your team, you know, could be neighbors, you know, in your office complex, as well as, you know, critical vendors maybe that, you know, that come in and out of your, you know, your building on a daily basis. So when you're doing team introductions, don't limit your thinking to just your technical employees. You know, I thought that was a great idea that, you know, we shared in one of our earlier Bank and Brews was, you know, who else is in the office building, you know, who you can expect to come in and out. That was a pretty nice tip and a great best practice to add to the list.
Thanks, Alex. Also want to remind you that it will be important to have what we call a manager checklist. So in our company, HR does that initial onboarding, and then we hand the employee off to a manager. Now, you might be the person doing the onboarding and the manager, or you may have a frontline manager. But important to have a checklist again. And Alex mentioned it may take a few days to onboard your employee because you are conducting business and helping customers during this onboarding period. Maybe that person, that new hire, is just kind of shadowing you or standing with you as you're working with customers. So have a checklist because there are probably a number of things that it's going to take some time to get through. Are there any security procedures that the employees need to follow? Do they need to know today about opening and closing procedures, or is it going to be a day or two before you show them those pieces? So kind of vet out the important things that they need to know on day one, and then some things that you might want to save for day two or beyond. The other thing that I remind new employees, anytime someone joins your team, they've made a life change. They've had a life event. And so that change is going to create, you know, some excitement, sometimes a little bit of anxiety. And so remember that this new employee is just soaking up all of this new information, and they're going to be tired. They're going to be maybe overwhelmed. They may ask you, you know, the next day, can you remind me, you know, this or that we reviewed yesterday? So be prepared to kind of review the next day some of the things that you went over. This will be really important, and also ensure the success of that new hire. So we've talked about onboarding, and Alex is going to now take us into what our orientation experience looks like.
Yeah. So we'd like to suggest to you that, you know, orientation, they're both important, but from the long-term strategic perspective of how successful is that employee going to be in the organization, orientation is very important. And you don't want that new hire to be distracted by those very, you know, important things. You know, how do you clock in? How do you clock out? I can't remember my password to enter this system. I can't remember what the procedure is, you know, to complete, you know, that task. So we recommend that you allow your employees to get through all those administrative, you know, onboarding experiences and to become comfortable with that. Then you start talking to them more about who you are. They probably have some sense for what the mission of your organization is through the hiring process, you know, through the interviews. Probably did enough research about you to know, you know, have a sense for what your mission is. But that's really what the orientation, in our opinion, should be about. It should be aligning, you know, your employees, you know, to your mission. So I would just, you know, challenge you, if you haven't, you know, written it down, you know, do that. You know, keeping it, you know, simple, using the least flowery words, you know, that you can. You want to make it very relatable. to your employees. So if you don't have a mission statement, I would encourage you to develop it. It'd be a great thing to talk to your employees about, helping develop, why are you doing, what you're doing? What is your reason for, for existing? And when you do that, when you've got your mission statement, then, that's an opportunity to talk about what your values are. What are the rules that you live by? And, you can communicate those in writing, as well. I'm not a huge fan of always having, stuff plastered on the wall, but I think it's pretty important to have a common mission that everyone's aware of, and then talking about, what are the values, how are you going about executing, on that mission. And we would be advocates for investing a lot of time and energy in discussion of mission, as well as those leadership values, because it will help you in the long run interacting with that employee, because you're having more of a values-based decision-making process versus a rules-based decision-making process. Because if you're very administrative in nature, and there's tons of policies and procedures that if this, then that, but then there's always an exception, and then here's how you handle that. It's, the documentation of how to, put that in writing to an employee would be overwhelming. So we would encourage you to have a really in-depth conversation with your new employees about your mission and what your values are. And as long as that they understand what your values are, chances are they're going to make the right decision when they're confronted with whatever the issue is. So that's what, we really enjoy about our new hire orientation, is that the employee has been inside the organization for some period of time. And just to give you guys an idea, it's not unusual. We'll do a new hire orientation once a quarter. So it's completely possible that we'll have a new employee who's been operating inside our company for 90 days before they come to new hire orientation. Sometimes they've only been there a week. But, as Liz and I, and a whole host of guest speakers are talking to the employees, during orientation about our culture, they've experienced it some. So, I don't know if you've ever, it's always much easier to, to maybe to understand some of the values when they can experience them. So, one of our corporate leadership values, for example, at Extraco is family first. We really do, believe that we want our employees to have a great home life, work life, balance. And if the two ever come into conflict, we understand that you got to put your family first. And that's an easy thing to put on the wall, right? Say, hey, we're a family first organization, but that's hard to understand what that means until you've experienced it. So sometimes it's nice for the employee to be inside the organization for a little while, and then when you throw out a corporate leadership value, then they can say, oh, well, now I get it, because I saw Christina behave in such a way in such a situation, and now I get it, because she was following this particular corporate leadership value. So that's one of the reasons why we think we would say the cultural orientation of your new employees should happen after a period of time. So they've had an opportunity to be a part of the organization, to observe how employees treat each other, see how you treat your customers, and then you talk specifically about what your mission is and what your corporate leadership values are. And I think is that something we have coming in a handout later? Yeah, we're getting thumbs up. Okay. It's a great time during new hire orientation to share your company's story. We're big believers in the narrative, right? And we love to bring in, and I'll say, even if you're a small company, when you're doing a new hire orientation day, at Extraco, we're a large organization. We'll bring in business unit leaders, and they all tell their story. What's their Extraco story? But if you're a small company, I would say if you could dedicate some period of time to being your new hire orientation, and if you've got, less than 10 people, what a great time for each one of your employees to tell their story, so that the new employee hears, their journey and hears their experience. about why they continue to work for your company. And that's our favorite time for me in new hire orientation, is when I'll hear our CEO come in, or I'll hear see various executive vice presidents come in, and they all tell their story about what Extraco means to them and why they continue to work for our company. And you'll get the company history through those leaders telling those stories. Let's see. We talked a little bit about the tour. Depending on the size of of your facility, on day one during onboarding, they may have had a quick run around. But if you can during that new hiring orientation, kind of re-engage them with maybe departments that they don't interact with all the time, it's a good time to give them a second look at it. So I wouldn't be opposed to a second tour, either with various departments or with other vendors, and find creative ways to communicate your culture. Now, I'll give you an example. We like having fun. Having a fun workplace is one of our corporate leadership values. So we'll play games, and Liz does a great job of having us play team activity games, and she mixes it up every so often so that the word doesn't get around about how to win the game. But I'd say find creative ways to communicate your culture, and it could be with a group activity. They participate in the activity that might have absolutely nothing to do with whatever line of business you're in, but then asking those employees to think about that experience and what connections culturally can they make between that game or that exercise that you just performed with how you go about doing your business. And I would say, if your business will tolerate it, allow it to be at least a half-day experience, so that part of that experience could be having a meal with your employees. There's something special about breaking bread with another human being, and being able to sit down and have a meal with somebody. Typically it's maybe towards the end or the last part of the orientation, is just highly recommend that. That it's a special time, and you'll notice that the barriers between who's the presenter, who's the person in authority versus who's the learner, when you sit down and break bread together, a lot of those barriers come down, and people just naturally become more relaxed. So we would definitely recommend feeding them. People love to eat. So feed your employees during that cultural orientation and eat with them. And surround yourself with your branding. That's a great time if you've got branded items all throughout the orientation. You can be giving them gifts or giving them presents, things that it doesn't have to be expensive, but nice little things where you surround them with your branded items, and they come away from this orientation feeling like they are they're wearing the brand. They've got they've come away with a little token that kind of represents, you're one of us now, right? You've been initiated, so to speak, into our culture. We think that's an important part of that orientation experience.
Thanks, Alex. Christina,
Sure.
Do we have any questions on onboarding or new hire orientation yet?
Not yet, but for those who do, please remember to use the chat feature. And Liz, I will let you know if those come rolling through.
Awesome. Well, then we're going to move right into setting expectations for your employees. So we have hired our folks and onboarded them, and hopefully given them some sort of great orientation experience. And we want to talk about you as the manager. Make sure that you are taking the time to develop yourself. You're here with us, meeting today, and that's a great start. That means that you want to learn and you want to improve the employee experience and make it better. And so remember to collaborate and mentor others and seek out mentors. This will just help you build your resources and have an opportunity to collaborate and bounce ideas off of other business owners. And it doesn't necessarily have to be people that are in the same line of business that you are. I think it's sometimes helpful to see how other businesses run. I'm always fascinated by small businesses. I love to frequent small businesses because I think it's really interesting to see all of the innovation and just the outside the box thinking that folks come up with. So again, I mentioned mentoring. Mentoring will really help you kind of talk through and vet out with somebody that's hopefully a neutral party, but it's super important. And with that, you've got to invest in your own growth. You've got to get out and get away sometimes and observe other businesses and other even in other cities if you can, just to really see what's new, what's innovative, and then grow your employees. Give them opportunities to do the same. Maybe have them secret shop another business and have them come back and tell you what worked with your experience and what would you improve from your experience. And so that will kind of help them understand what the customer sees when they are in your storefront or your restaurant. And so back to this, you want to make sure that you give your employees a list of job duties. So we talked about setting expectations. So what do you expect from them? I think putting that down on paper so that they can see that and agree to it. We have what we call a list of job duties, and then we have a job design. Job duties are kind of static. They usually stay the same, and a job design can sometimes change depending on the season, the year. Certainly things can change. Christina, I believe, has some handouts and some templates that you can use, but I would suggest that you have the employee initial or sign off on that. So during that onboarding session, you can show them, these are some of the things that we expect from you. And we are going to give you a copy to look over, and then we'd like you to also initial that, and we're going to keep that for our files so that when we do our 90-day evaluation, we can talk about the successes and the areas of opportunity. So feedback. Everyone wants feedback. People, I really believe, are genuinely wired to meet your expectations, and they want to please you and please the customer, especially folks. I mean, you've hopefully hired someone that's great and knows the importance of a great customer experience. So they're looking for your feedback. And so I would definitely set aside time, and it could be weekly, bi-monthly or monthly, depending on the time that you have. But setting aside time that you sit with the employee and talk about, like I said, successes and areas of opportunity. You can call them mistakes if you want. You can call them, maybe you've gotten customer feedback that you want to go over with them. Maybe you use social media and there's been a comment that's been left, and you want to talk about that experience. That's why one-on-ones are so important. Alex, do you want to mention, maybe from your perspective, why one-on-ones are so important at Extraco?
Yeah, I mean, with our culture at Extraco, it's we're always building people. That's one of our, that's part of our mission. And that's that's why we're doing what we're doing is we want to build people. And the most effective way we found, to do that is to have those dedicated times between the supervisor and their employee to, work towards that goal. So every one-on-one meeting is not going to be about, what are your career aspirations, and, we recognize there's a lot of, blocking and tackling that, that needs to happen, some projects and some, some check-in points and some reviews, and that's all, that's all important, in the one-on-one. And every employee deserves, frequent feedback about, their performance and how they're doing, and, the standard that you have, set, and whether they're achieving that standard. And it's not about, I would say, one thing that's important to remember about one-on-ones, it's not about, we don't like to use good or bad. It's, is it effective or ineffective? Are you that way, it depersonalizes the feedback, particularly if it's critical, in nature. So that would just be one, I guess, a comment. If I were to pivot in on, the art of the one-on-one is make it effectiveness focused versus good or bad, focus. It doesn't mean you can't have hard numerical goals, right? You could, hey, we need to make X number of sales, or you have to do so many transactions, or, we need a customer service score of, they can be very, hard measures. But you talk about what behaviors and activities are you doing to be effective towards that. And I would say if you've got a good, one-on-one routine, with your employees, or you're checking in with them on a regular basis, that when it comes time for annual performance appraisals, that's what we like to say around here. No surprises. No one should ever be surprised, around their annual review, because you should be having, regular, basically mini reviews, with your employees. So, don't get too far astray there, Liz, on that topic.
No, that was great. What I wanted to kind of reiterate about what you said is, if you're having those regular one-on-one conversations, I think things are going to go a lot better, a lot smoother. You shouldn't have as much conflict because there's more frequent communication. And the employee deserves to hear from you more than just once or twice a year. And I bet all of you have had a new employee come up and say, how am I doing? Am I doing okay? How did that conversation go? And I hope that you'll be able to say, glad you asked. I'm going to set a meeting, and we're going to kind of go through and answer your questions. And I've got some great feedback I want to give you.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, Liz, or something I forgot to say, and you might say it, but for those of you that are in a supervisor position and you start imagining, oh my gosh, I've got, X number of people reporting to me and preparing for these meetings just sounds overwhelming. You, as the manager, should not be responsible for the agenda of the meeting. That reduces your burden as the leader of the one-on-one dramatically. I'll set the expectation. I'll say, Liz, I need to meet with you once a month, and it is your responsibility to get on my calendar and provide me an agenda, a day ahead of time, an hour ahead of time, whatever, of like, what do we want to discuss? And here are, the general categories of what I expect to see on the agenda. Once you set the expectation, you as the manager, you offload that. You put that on the employee, and have them schedule the one-on-ones, have them drive the agenda. And that's a huge administrative burden that you should not take on yourselves. We learned that the hard way at Extraco. Our managers were getting swamped with just keeping up with, because they felt like they had to be in charge of what are we going to talk about. That's not your role as the boss. Your role as the boss is to provide the feedback, and honest feedback and help and support, but let that employee drive the agenda on the one-on-one, and it will make your life as the manager so much easier. So you might talk a little bit more about that, Liz. But Liz does a great job. She manages our one-on-one process very, very well.
I take it pretty seriously because I do like, that good frequent communication. And so I report to Alex, and I will set an agenda out. And instead of bugging him all the time, I'll just plant stuff out on the agenda. And then when we have our meeting, we can kind of go through things, and some of it gets answered. But that's kind of the other interesting thing about setting those times is if you have employees that are constantly asking you questions that maybe aren't, don't need to be answered today, they're not urgent. You could say, why don't you save that for our one-on-one? And then you're kind of teaching the employee how to communicate with you. If you have folks that don't have a lot of experience, this can be really an important way to kind of manage your time. So you're not having, 5 or 10 employees coming up and asking you questions. You can say, let's save that for the team huddle, or let's save that for your one-on-one. Great question, by the way, and I bet you there's other folks that want to hear the answer to that. So, just think about communication. I think all of this is centered around really good communication and, acknowledging how important it is to have those routines. So Alex, do you want to talk about, establishing some accountability?
Sure. One of the questions that, we would get from a lot of companies that are, new or developing, or, they've gone from being, sole proprietor to, now they have 3 or 4, employees. Question always seems to come up about, the employee handbook, because, most people have worked somewhere and there's, there's an employee handbook. I'll tell you, Extraco has an employee handbook. Because of our relationship we have with the federal government, I have to have one. There are certain, mandates as a federally chartered bank that we have to do, and one of them is, to publish an employee handbook that addresses X, Y, and Z, right? So, but a lot of the people who attend these types of seminars don't fall within that requirement. So, I would say if you feel strongly about having an employee handbook, you should have one, but don't feel like you need a handbook in order to hold your employees accountable to your expectations. Because if you're using the employee handbook as the tool that you use to communicate, your feedback or your expectations, you're going to get yourself in a catch-22. Because if you sit down to, have an accountability conversation and you say, well, as you can see here in our handbook, it states this. Well, every time you want to provide some constructive criticism to somebody, you're giving that employee permission to say, well, I didn't see that in the handbook. So now you've got to go draft up, a new policy or a new set of rules. And that's just, that's counterproductive. And the world changes so rapidly, you can't possibly create a handbook that's always up to date. The world just changes too fast. So I would say if you have to have an employee handbook because of federal regulations, fine. There's a ton of them out there. Sam talked to, somebody made mention of Liz being, a Society of Human Resources Management, certified professional. She can get a plug to them later. There's all kinds of organizations you can join, like SHRM, that you can, get template handbooks, modify them. Doesn't have to be as big a deal, as you might imagine to create one. But I would say if you don't have one, don't feel like, unless it's required by mandate, that you have to have one. You can effectively hold people accountable by just having a really good job description. And, that's important. I think it's important to have a very clear and up-to-date job description. It is okay to update that job description on a regular basis, have the employee acknowledge, the changes, to the new job description. And it doesn't need to be more complicated, than that. So I would suggest to a lot of small businesses that you could achieve the objective of having some sort of document to help hold an employee accountable to a set of standards by just having a really good job description versus creating this mammoth, employee handbook that's never going to be comprehensive enough to address, your needs. But again, that's about, setting the expectations, setting the boundaries. Those can all happen, within the job description. It's important to have goals. They can be measurable. They can be developmental. goals. But it's important that they have some kind of specificity and some sort of measurement around those goals. And if you can put a time frame on them, you always hear people talk about SMART goals. They're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're relevant, and they're time frame, which I think is another great accountability tool, is that if you update your goals periodically. I'll also tell you that, a goal is just like a job description, right? It's just a tool. It's not 10 commandments that are chiseled, into stone and can never be changed. That I think that's the beauty of, here at Extraco, our goals are fluid. We do have a routine where we're in the strategic planning phase right now, right? We're thinking about what do we want to achieve in 2021. And I'll use this pandemic as a great example. In October and November of 2019, we had no idea this was coming. So, we set goals as a company. We cascade those goals down, to employees so that they have relevant goals. But what kind of sense would it make to hold an employee accountable to a set of goals that were developed before the pandemic? The whole world, changed. So setting expectations is important, but it's also important to adjust those expectations as the environment around you changes. And I think employees understand that, but it's just one of those administrative things that it's important to, talking about a great topic for one-on-ones, right? Hey, we're going to get together and you can set the expectation. I want you to review your goals with me monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, whatever makes sense for you. But, review those goals, but also as a leader, be willing to change those goals. The things that you decided at one point in time were important might not be important today. And that's okay to change them. And it's okay to, to acknowledge that and to just, if you want to broom a goal because it's not important anymore, broom it. You're the boss, it's your company, you can do whatever you want. That doesn't, that's different. It doesn't mean you don't hold your employees accountable, right? You still, you just don't necessarily hold them accountable to goals that are no longer relevant, because that doesn't create a good employee experience. So. Got to hit all the topics, Liz?
Yes,
Anything
sir.
else you want? Okay.
Are there any questions that anyone has over any of the sections that we covered? We really do want to be a resource for you and answer your questions.
And if y'all don't want to write them into the chat or think of questions after the fact, feel free, you can email them to myself or Alex and Liz, and we'll pass along their contact information after the session wraps up. So if you are a processor and want to think about all the information that we've shared and have questions after, please don't hesitate to reach out.
And I'll say that we really do, both before we got into human resources, Liz and I both spent significant portions of our career, helping customers. We were on the front line. And while I love being in a support role, boy, I miss mixing it up with our customers. So that is a very sincere offer. I could speak for Liz that we love our customers at Extraco, or potential customers. We love, talking to people, outside our four walls. And, there's some days when I'll just go stand in the lobby and see who I recognize, and, just want to stay connected to the customers. So that is a very sincere offer. If you've got questions or want to bounce ideas off of somebody, our fee is $0, and the advice is worth what you paid for. So, but we're happy to be a sounding board, and we'd love to, hear your ideas, share our thoughts. So that is a very sincere offer that Christina made. That and Liz and I yearn the old days of talking to customers. So.
Absolutely second that. Yes, sir.
Hey, let me just on behalf of everybody, Alex and Liz, thank y'all so much for the time today. Y'all have really provided a nice insight, even for me who work with y'all in the same building every day. I would love to be a fly on the wall in HR, because y'all get to be involved in so many great decisions and conversations and meet so many neat people. And I think you touched on it. It is not coincidence that both you and Liz didn't start out as HR professionals. Y'all both came from the front lines dealing with customers, and y'all were two of the best that we've ever had. So it's not surprising that Extraco has chosen y'all to help be the clearinghouse for making that first impression on people interested in Extraco, and then help make the decisions on who's going to be part of Extraco's team. I want to thank y'all again. We're doing this again. The second part of our HR Bank and Brews is going to be, the next workshop is October the 27th. Again, it'll be at noon. This one might be a little bit more juicy though, because it's about discipline and termination. So I'm lobbying them to, if they can erase the names, to tell us some of their "I can't believe that just happened" stories.
Right.
So maybe we'll have something juicy to talk about. But yes, that's when I'd really like to be a fly on the wall, is when somebody's getting disciplined or somebody's getting terminated. And on a serious note, you know, one of the things they're going to talk about is the difference between an employee development plan and an employee discipline plan. Those are two distinctively different things. And then when it comes to termination, if you haven't heard the horror stories of how it can go badly for your business if you terminate somebody in the wrong manner, you really need to tune in. And if you have heard some of the horror stories, then you're already going to tune in, because, and let some of your other friends that are in decision-making positions or ownership positions of other businesses know about October the 27th for that next Bank and Brew. Christina and Libby, thank you and all of our marketing folks for putting this on and letting us all be a part of it. And we call it Bank and Brews because we used to do this at different times of the day, and it was either coffee or iced tea or maybe a cold brew after work. Now that we do them at lunchtime, we don't know where you are when you're doing it, so we know it could be any of all three of them. Mine today happened to be coffee. I mean iced tea.
There's no telling.
Do this again.
Coffee.
Yes. So until further notice, thank y'all for joining us, and we'll see y'all on October the 27th for the second half of our HR Focus Bank and Brews with Extraco. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.